Good morning, everyone. Rob here doing this week's vlog. Just a gorgeous morning, taking some time to be reflective about the things that I'm super grateful for. I immediately comes to mind is my sister. I mentioned to you guys before that she's had to undergo a pretty intense and severe breast cancer surgery. And we are just so pleased that she doesn't have to get the chemo or the radiation. It was extremely rare. So they managed to get it all. And I couldn't help but take a moment and think there's such joy in getting some good news, and part of that experiencing such profound joy is because of the immense suffering that came with the diagnosis and having the surgery. A terrific opportunity for me to reflect on how much suffering there is, but the flip side of it is that there can be some real joy in finding meaning rather than just the pursuit of perpetual happiness, which of course is really fleeting. I'm glad, I really love that Embark Behavioral Health stands for that, because we know how much our people, our clients and the families are in a place of suffering. This week's vlog came to me as a request, believe it or not, to Rob, can you talk more about really seeing people for their emotional or developmental age versus their chronological age. What continues to come to mind is we all exist on the continuum of development somewhere. That are any of us our chronological age? In fact, what's interesting is we tend to get frustrated when younger people in age aren't developmentally where we typically see that they should be. Whereas we give a lot of recognition to elderly people who might be in their late 80s or whatever, and yet they present as really young. So I think it's all relative in some ways. But what I want to talk about is especially when we have some developmental trauma, developmental disruption, for a number of reasons that oftentimes we interact with people, and there's an expectation or presupposition that they should act their age. But if we can look deeper and look at the indicators and attune with where they're at developmentally, it actually helps to change our expectations. It actually creates a heart of peace for us to be able to see them as one is doing their best, but are we actually attuned and accurately seeing for where they are developmentally and emotionally? Oftentimes that's a hard gauge, because when we have early developmental disruption, I like to use the term, well, where are they at chronologically? Oftentimes we hear 16, 17. Well, where are they at developmentally? Boy, maybe they're 10 or 11. And often I say, I think that's really generous. Because if we look back and see developmentally, oftentimes we see people with developmental trauma and issues of shame and self-worth. They might throw temper tantrums. They actually get dysregulated. They manipulate to try to get their own way. And those are actually developmental. If we look at it, those are reflections or symptoms of the underlying shame that's there. Developmentally, we always want to look at the development of the self. That neurobiological experience of worth comes when? Throughout the developmental life cycle. It should be hardwired in us from conception through 7 years of age and then building on it. However, if we don't get that, what happens? We see that continue to leak out in their development. So oftentimes it's more on us that we get frustrated. Well, gosh, you're 15, you're 16. I have higher expectations for you. But if you see where they're at developmentally, and they really struggle with their sense of self, and you look back, they're oftentimes 1 to 3. 1 to 3. The mismatch is what? We often want to treat them like they're 15 and 16. With privileges and expectation, versus going back and saying, wait a second, what does a 3-year-old need? What does a 4-year-old need? It's not patronizing, it's attunement. Well, I'd like to build on this more and more. I know it's easier said than done, hard to do, but I just want to plant some seeds. Continually ask ourselves, we want to connect with people. Where are they at emotionally versus where they're at chronologically? And look at that sense of self. Okay, see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.